welcome back. We have Sideways Rain episode 13. Man, I can't believe we're at episode 13 already. And it's Friday, and today is a special Friday. Today is my birthday, May 9th. I am turning the big 33. So happy to be on with you, JR, and celebrate. But most importantly, this day is more than special just because it's my birthday, but this is actually the same day 2 years ago that JR and I reconnected, and he shared his idea, which turned into WIFT. So it's funny, man. 2 years has gone by already.
It's crazy. Yeah. Happy birthday, first of all. And I think when I reached out, we were just talking about this. I had no idea it was your birthday. It was just kind of cold coming out of COVID. How you doing? Maybe saw a LinkedIn anniversary or something. But yeah, the rest is history. And we're going to cover a little bit about that today.
Yeah, super excited to get into it. And basically, we're just going to talk about how we turned that idea into what it is today and the road that we took to get there. But before we get into that, here comes the rain.
Like we said at the top, 2 years in, it's been a journey. There's been ups and downs, wins and losses, pivots and resilience. And here we are today. Chris, could you imagine when I reached out to you and sent you a LinkedIn message, because I didn't even have your email, that we would be here today 2 years later?
Never in a million years, especially working in the industry that we work in, kind of once you lose contact with a professional colleague in your industry, you don't really rekindle with those things unless you have a common client or a common event that brings you back together. So to see you reach out to me, and I was super excited, one, just to catch up and see what you had been up to, because it'd been years since we last spoke. But boy, am I glad that you did. And to see what it turned out to turn into, super excited that you did, and super excited to be a part of this journey with you.
Yeah, so this episode's a little self-serving. We're going to talk about WIFT and the journey today, and I think the Sideways Rain portion is really, like I said at the top, about resilience and pivoting and listening to the marketplace. And where we started with this, I actually started with this idea with my father, who was my boss at the time, Howard Sr. He said there should be a calculator on our website that tells people how many people can fit in a ballroom with production. So we were trying to solve a problem that we were seeing every day, because meeting planners and sourcing managers were taking what the hotels said carte blanche, and the hotels were saying you can fit X amount of people in the room. And yes, that might be true, but that didn't include any equipment. That didn't include a stage. That didn't include front of house. And so we were often trying to shoehorn our events into these small spaces. And we said, if we could get ahead of this and help them out, let's do it. So it started with a rudimentary calculator. 8 years down the road, Arnie and I built out a very basic iOS app, very basic, with pre-planned floor plans. It wasn't dynamic. Wrote the algorithm that we're still using today, but we knew we had to take it to the next level. And as I started to research how to build it out and really make it happen, it became abundantly clear the folks at 180, we had plenty of other stuff to do, and I wasn't going to get the kind of commitment that I think we needed to get this done. And so when I reached out to Chris, it wasn't really initially about, like, I think Chris can do this. It was about, hey, I have this idea. What do you think? And I'd be interested in what your thoughts were when I approached you with this sort of out of left field.
Yeah, most definitely. And I remember it like it was yesterday, because first and foremost, I never realized that this was a problem in the industry. Now, I've been to one too many events where we're crammed in a room, seating's tight, it's hot, it's sweaty, it's nasty, but I never thought about, hey, how do we get here? So when you reached out to me, JR, and you pitched this idea to me, I instantly made that connection of, yes, this is a problem, and I've lived it, I've breathed it, and it's not going to get any better just on its own. So the way that you reached out, I really appreciate it as well, because like you said, you weren't coming to me saying, hey, I want you to build this idea that I've been struggling to build. You just pitched it to me and said, what do you think? Do you think I have something here?
Yeah.
And I think the way that you approached the pitch really helped me understand, one, you were genuine in what you were trying to do, and two, this was a lifelong thing that you have seen repeat itself time and time again, and you wanted to do something about it. And from that very moment, I was bought in, and the rest was history. We just kind of partnered up and figured out, okay, we both think that we have something here. What do we do next?
Yeah. And neither one of us are coders, so it took a little digging and work on your side on the front end. And I think that was one of our earliest challenges was we have this great idea. We want to build out dynamic floor plans. We want them to be based on actual rooms and not drawn in squares like we have them now. And how do we do that? How do we find it? And I think there's a really interesting story about how we found Sean. And I think the audience would love to hear it.
Most definitely. So it's so funny. So we go from catching up on LinkedIn to, okay, we have an idea, to two or three, I should say. Now, who's going to build this thing?
Yeah.
We need to find developers, right? So I remember vividly the first thing that we did was we started researching offshore companies because we thought that would be the gateway in at a low cost that would be able to get us to MVP. So I'll never forget this story. Just to give a little context, at this time, I had torn my Achilles.
Mm.
So getting around was a little tough for me, right? So luckily, I have a uncle that has been a barber for over 20 years. So cutting my hair myself quickly went out the window dealing with a torn Achilles. So one day I reach out to my uncle and schedule a haircut, and I'm in the chair and I'm telling him, hey, a really good professional colleague of mine reached out with an idea. We just need a developer to build this thing. He stops the clippers and he says, I know a guy. And I say, there's no way you know a guy that can just do specifically what I just explained to you and you're confident. And he pulled out his phone and he dialed a number, and that number was for Sean Onusi. And the rest is history. And I'm sure, as you all know, we've had Sean on the show. Sean is one of the brightest developers in the industry that JR and I have come across. And we pitched the idea to him. And just like myself, he was immediately bought in on not only the idea, but the potential impact that it could have. And we quickly got a call on the books to introduce Sean to JR and just have a formal conversation of exploring like what we're really trying to do. And we instantly clicked, and the rest is history.
Yeah, crazy stuff. And it was a hard sell too, because when we talked to Sean on the podcast too, if y'all haven't heard it, it's a pretty awesome episode. He says he gets approached with these ideas all the time, right? Like you say, you're a developer and you can make applications and, you know, write code, and you got your friends and family telling you about the hot dog app they want to make or something crazy. And so he probably gets thrown this stuff all the time. And we had to approach it, and really, it was almost like a pitch to Sean to say, here's the idea, here's the problem, and here's how we're going to solve it. And with Sean not being in our industry, we really had to create a baseline of like definitions, like here's how meetings and events work specifically for corporations, and here's the problem that we have, and here's the problem that we want to solve. And once we were able to connect those dots for Sean, he said, yep, that's a real problem I want to help you solve. And he was in and brought in another developer, and off we were on the coding journey, which also had its highs and lows.
Most definitely. And during this time, we weren't completely sold on Sean being the guy because, as I mentioned before, we were considering other options that were more built out. There was a team of people that we would be paying for to help us build this thing. But at the end of the day, we had to make a decision on who we felt more comfortable going into business with.
Yep.
And I think this was one of the first major decisions that we had to make as a partnership. Do you go with the guy that the barber recommended that you have never met before? Or do you go with an established company that's overseas that's saying that they could build this thing in 2 to 3 months? And I know for myself, I felt a connection with Sean. JR, I think you did as well. But what would you say ultimately made you decide to neglect the company and go with Sean?
One of the considerations obviously was cost. When we talked to some of these companies, we were talking much bigger numbers, and that's not to say that Sean's work is worth less. It was probably worth a lot more. But it was also about the time and access that Sean was able to provide us as a team, because one of the companies we were looking at was based out of Poland, and we actually liked them quite a bit, and they were saying all the right things, but we were concerned about time changes. We were concerned about limitations on the amount of time they could work on it and when they could work on it. And since Chris and I obviously have other full-time jobs, we wanted somebody sort of in the position that we were that was going to be willing to get on calls after hours or early mornings and put in the time as you had it in Flex. And that ultimately drove the decision. Also, just the way that Sean spoke about his ability and his excitement about the product, you could see he was already coming up with solutions in his own head while we were discussing. And I think one of the things that really pushed me is Sean also would step away and he would start to make these things to prove to himself that he could do it. And he would say to us on the calls, like, this isn't a theory anymore. I've actually already done it. So like, let's just go.
For sure. Yeah, shout out to Sean, man.
Yeah.
I've never met someone that loves to be challenged, but
Yeah.
can conquer a task so quickly and think miles and miles ahead.
Yeah.
And I think I know I can speak for myself. I've developed to adopt that mindset when it comes to being an entrepreneur and thinking way down the line in terms of where you want to go, because that has a major impact on the way that you do things in the present. And Sean has definitely taught me that. So once again, shout out to Sean, man.
Yeah.
Super glad to have you on the team and can't wait to see what we're able to do over these next few years.
So we started the conversation in May of 23. I
Hmm.
think we finally settled with Sean and the team later that year. I think it was August, September, maybe even October. And we were off on a journey. And initially, we said in our heads, let's get this to a place we want it to be by Jan 1. And how did that go?
Yep. It went exactly how we planned it, right? So we didn't meet that January 1 launch.
Yep.
I'll be honest there. We ran into some things that were unforeseen, certain things that we as a team scoped out and said, this will take 2 weeks. It took 2 months.
Yep.
Things that we thought were going to be super quick, they weren't. Planning to do certain functionalities in the tool, we thought it was going to be a simple task. It wasn't. And that inflated our timeline, but we eventually got to where we wanted to be with the MVP. Now, some of the growing pains that we learned with that was we committed to a timeline in the very beginning. We signed contracts for our contractors or our developers. And as those timelines changed, as other priorities in our lives changed, we had to navigate those tough decisions and one, separate emotion from what's best for the business and have those tough conversations with the dev team on, hey, we understand these things are taking longer. How do we get to a common ground where we can get to the end product that we all agreed on?
Yeah.
And I'm sure, JR, you can attest to some of those conversations. It helped us learn, and it also helped us progress forward.
Yeah. I think some advice for the audience is one, well, I just want to acknowledge we got lucky with Sean and the team because they were very flexible in this. We sort of laid out a contract that outlined what MVP was supposed to be, but there was a lot of squishiness to that, right? So like what they thought it was in their head versus what we thought it was in our head sometimes was different. And then that created more work and time. And thankfully and luckily, they were able to put in that time without charging us a bunch extra in that process. So that worked out really well. I think one thing for the audience to consider is if you don't have that kind of relationship or you're working with a third party, make sure your contracts are extremely detailed about what finished is, because if there's any misinterpretation from either side, that's going to create conflict, and conflict around money is always really challenging.
Most definitely. And I think the number one thing we learned fresh out of the gate with this project, once we had everybody under contract, was if you don't know specifically how every piece of functionality is expected to work, that opens the floodgates of more hours burnt, more money spent, and a longer road to getting to the final product that you have in your head. And that's something that I learned personally where we have this great idea. Now we got a great dev team to build it, but we haven't thought about the details of everything. And because we're vague in some of those areas, we uncovered that something that we thought is as simple as going in and adding a few lines of code is something that took weeks to master.
Yep.
And then once we were able to see it on our phones, it still didn't fit what we had in our heads. Now, a lot of that is on us because we weren't clear about what we wanted, but this is another growing pain that we learned from. And we were thankful to have a team like Sean and another developer to help us be flexible and still get to where we were trying to go for our MVP.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I learned in the process is, the back end versus the UX UI, both carry incredible importance. So not only does it have to do all the math and coding and data on the back end, but it has to look and feel good on the front end too. So there's a design aspect to this, which took all of us an effort there and is very nuanced and also very subjective. So again, just be as detailed as you can in that process. But so we navigate that journey, late night calls, early mornings. We get to MVP. And that's a win, right? Like we're like, yes, we have it. Let's go on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We're going to promote this thing. And what's going to happen, Chris? They're all just going to come running, right?
Yeah, that's once again, we're so excited. We got this thing wrapped up in a shiny bow. And before we jump into that, I wanted to tell the audience simultaneously when we were getting close to finishing MVP, JR came to me and he said, what do we do when we have our MVP?
Yeah.
Like we got to get this thing in front of as many planners as we can. And keep in mind, this is my first time ever running a business and being an entrepreneur and starting something from the ground up. So I don't have a lot of expertise on how we market this thing, who we should be targeting, all of these things. It's new to me. And JR suggested one of the things that I think was life changing for me. And I think it was life changing for a lot of my peers as well. And he recommended signing up for a Harvard online business course. And the name of that course at the time was called Launching Tech Ventures. And it was a 6 week course that I signed up for. It was about 20 hours a week that I would dedicate to this course. And it took you through the very start of an idea. And it took you through every step of the way on how to bring that idea to life, but not only bring it to life, how to prove that you have a valid idea, how to prove that the market that you're trying to target is interested in your idea, and then two or three, how to continue to capture that segment of that market.
Yep.
And once we got to MVP, JR is looking at me like, hey, Chris, what do we do now? Like, I know this thing is solving a problem, but what do we do? And this is where we had to, one, learn patience in trying things and learning how to pivot. So, as vividly as I can remember, I know that we heavily use LinkedIn. I'm talking social posts, videos, pictures, demos, cold outreach. We were trying everything under the sun to just get into a room or a conversation with like-minded people that we thought would be interested in the product, whether it be planners, sourcing managers, sourcing companies. We were really just trying to get this thing in front of as many people as we could. And what we learned was when we did get in those rooms and we did show these people, the response wasn't what we initially thought it would be. We thought that this was going to blow people's minds and everybody would come running, like I'm sure everyone does that has an idea, but that wasn't the case, right?
So humility is key. If you're an entrepreneur or you're running a startup, you don't know what you don't know. And that was sort of the intention behind the Harvard course. And then continuing to learn in the process is staying humble. And one thing that you pulled out of that Harvard course was pivoting, and it was really the messaging around you don't get to tell the market what they need. The market tells you what they need. And so If you brought something to the market that solves a problem, but they're not seeing that problem, then you made the wrong thing. And so that's not the position we were necessarily in. We had solved a problem that people knew existed, but there was so much historical information in the marketplace for these meeting planners and sourcing managers that a lot of them were still doing napkin math, and that was okay for them. That was enough for them in the moment. And so maybe we were a little bit early, or maybe the tool wasn't ready to be accepted, or maybe we hadn't positioned it right. But we knew we had something, and that's something that we knew was proven when we went to IMEX in 2024.
Most definitely. And IMEX was, I would say, for me, the first time that I felt real validation,
Mm.
not just, oh, this is cool. But at IMEX, it was like jaw dropping. Can I give you my information so that I can get access to this? Can I ask you questions about this in real time? And that it took some time for us to get that validation. That was not fresh out of the gate. We took a lot of rejection prior to that. But the one thing that I will say to all those listening is just because we went through this tough time of not getting a response that we initially thought, that was still very, very valuable feedback for us to one, digest, and then figure out as a team, how are we going to pivot and how are we going to continue to move forward?
Almost.
And I think that that took a lot of Monday morning calls with JR and I to just kind of say, hey, like, all right, we tried this thing. It didn't go the way that we planned. Now what?
Yep.
I feel like we're stuck. I feel like we had that call so many times where we just got on there and said, what do we do now?
Yep.
And that's how IMEX came up. JR reached out one day and he said, hey, all of these industry professionals are telling me that they're going to IMEX. We should be there. And I think it was what, 2 or 3 weeks out
Yeah.
that
It was close.
we decided, hey, like if you're available, if you could take time off, like let's just go
Yep.
and walk the floor, introduce ourselves, meet people, and see what happens. And yeah, the rest is history.
It was so close that we couldn't even find somewhere on the strip. We stayed way down the strip at the Strat, but that actually worked out for us because we found a great steak place. But
For
um,
sure.
yeah, lots of challenges in there. And then we showed up at IMEX, and to go back to what you said, I think the mindset we had was all feedback was good feedback. So whether it was positive or constructive, any feedback was valuable for us. And so this is where a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck or quit, right? They're like, well, I made the thing and the market doesn't want it, or they want something different, and now I'm going to be done. And that's actually where we got started. So we
For
said we have
sure.
a thing. We poked at the parts that they liked, and then we actually went to IMEX without any investment in IMEX. We just showed up and we said we're going to find as many people as we can on the floor or in education sessions and show it to them, and that's what we did. And I think day one was probably the most valuable when we were in the MPI education sessions and able to sit at those tables with planners, before the session started and said, hey, who are you? This is who I am. This is why I'm here. Do you want to see it? And that's where people were like, I want this. I
Mind blown.
need this. And we actually had people like willing to advocate for us. And we left there with so much momentum and joy, which was also short lived.
Most definitely. And you made me think of something that we didn't touch on. One of the biggest decisions that we made once we got to MVP was we wanted to be a mobile first application. So as soon as we got to MVP and we thought we had this great idea, the first thing that we did was launch in the App Store. And speaking personally, that was the most underwhelming experience that I've ever went through on this journey because I thought as soon as we launch in the App Store and we start marketing this thing, the downloads are going to be crazy.
Yeah.
And it was the exact opposite. And we were baffled as to why that was. But then we fast forward to Amex and we're in these education sessions and people are like, oh my gosh, where can I download this? And at that point, we made the strategic decision to pull back from the App Store because our idea is just sitting on the open market.
Yep.
And that's where I think I learned the value of exclusivity and wanting something that is not readily accessible.
Yep.
And that's where all of those people that we met at IMEX that were interested, we would say, hey, we can give you access to our beta. It's not officially launched in the App Store, but we would love for you to use it and gather your feedback on what you think is great, what you think could be better. And I think that was the very beginning of our recipe for success. But it took that in-person validation and seeing those raw reactions, I think, for us to get that clicking recipe of this is what we need to do, but on a larger scale.
Yeah. And we're still not in the App Store, which is intentional as well as we build out additional features. So we walked away from IMEX with a lot of great contacts, and we were able to make some really good ones with some planners that have teams that are large. And we actually, within a couple of months, were able to stand up a pilot program that was great, great investment from the stakeholder on that. The stakeholder required everyone to use the app. The stakeholder initiated their own sort of survey and had them take our survey. And so we were drowning in all this data around what the positives were, what else they wanted it to do. And so we sort of knew what our path had to be. And shout out to that person who I'm not going to name on this for putting that together. But that was a huge step for us. Now we've heard and had validation from multiple planners that yes, this is a tool I would use, but I also wanted to do X, Y, and Z. And so then we were able to put together a future vision plan.
Most definitely. And in that moment, that was our market validation. That was a player in the space that's been there for years telling us, you have something, and if it could do these things, it's gold.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we learned we're no longer building the idea that we think is best. We're now listening to the audience and we're building what they're asking for.
Yep.
Because that is what the market is, that's what they're demanding.
Yep.
And the beauty of it is we have all of this feedback now from reputable sources. Now we just share that with Sean and we say, hey, can we do this? And Sean says, of course, it's easy. And at that point, now we're right back to square one where we're saying, all right, well, if we're going to build these features, what's the roadmap look like? How long is it going to take? And what promises can we make to others that are potentially interested or other piloting programs that would love to try this functionality out?
Yep.
And that's kind of where we stand today, where we're building a brand and we're building a foundation of a bunch of players that one are industry experienced, but two, they're forward thinking
Yep.
in how we can better shape the industry.
Yep.
And that's the perfect position that we want to be in. And I think this is where we always saw ourselves. We just didn't know how to get there.
Yeah. And so we're building out a feature set, some of which we thought was in the future vision when we first started, and some of which is brand new. And we're building for 12 months out to go to market. But we're also thinking 3 years out, like what's the market going to want when we get to X, Y, and Z point. And that's the fun part right now is, again, to be in this development phase, to be making the thing that when it's done, people are going to be like, yes, thank you, finally. So that's really exciting about this process right now. But the highs and the lows, it's definitely been an up and down journey. And like you said, we had a great week last week, but then you get back on Monday and you're like, all right, well, we're back to work. What's next? Here we go. And so you can't sit too long on the highs because in the end, like if you get complacent or think you have it figured out, that's when you go wrong. So we're continuing to push ourselves, like what's the next thing? Celebrate the victory short term, but what's the long term for the company?
Most definitely. And that was a tough learning experience for me because we're building this thing behind the scenes. No one really knows what we're doing. And then next thing you know, we have a target person that we're going after and we finally get a response. We get a meeting on the calendar and it's like, this is the hardest thing. Once we get this meeting on the books, the rest is history. And then that meeting happens and it's like, well, that didn't go anywhere near the way that we thought it would. Now what?
Yeah.
And I'm sure, JR, you can speak to times where you maybe consider just saying like, is this really worth the squeeze?
Yeah.
Because it's been 2 years and that's just that we've been working together. I know that you came up with this idea much prior to us venturing out together. So just to see your resilience, I want to give you your flowers on that because never getting too low and continuing to push forward, continuing to try new things and always being willing to pivot, I think is why we were able to reach the successes that we've had thus far.
Yeah, this journey's taught me a lot, and I think about who I was 2 years ago before we started versus where I am today, and I think some of the losses beat me down a little bit harder when we first started, and I've learned as a leader and an entrepreneur, all of that is positive momentum. So like those losses are just as valuable as the wins, but you have to learn from the losses. Don't just beat it down. Don't walk away. Say, why did we lose in this scenario? What can we do next to pivot? How do we move forward? And I think again, that's where a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck and just say like, well, I didn't have the right idea, or this is a loss. I'm going to cut my losses and get out. And that's why so few, like maybe a third of entrepreneurs actually get to cash or to market or to profit is because, and it's not to say that they're not resilient, but you have to be willing to put in years, right? It often takes 2, 3, 4 years to see success in a startup. And everybody has this rosy vision of like, I'm going to be the next Facebook and it's just going to take off. And one day I'm going to be at Harvard and the next day I'm going to be global. It doesn't work like that, right? Those are very few and far between unicorns, and you have to keep after it. You have to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. So we know what the problem is, and now the marketplace is telling us what the solution is, and we're going to continue down that path.
Most definitely. And words of advice from myself is you can never get too ahead of yourself, and you have to know that things will never happen when you expect them to.
Yeah.
And I think that has been a testament to everything that we have gone through because when we got to a certain place, we thought a certain thing would happen. And then on the flip side, when we are just doing our regular scheduled daily meetings, our regular scheduled outreach, regular scheduled posts, starting the podcast, now we're starting to get the traction that we have been dying to get over the last year and a half. But JR and I just stayed steady. We didn't get too high. We didn't get too low. We continued to pour into our community. And eventually someone saw it that saw the value and shared the same vision that we did. And they said, hey, we want to help.
Yep.
And that's what it's all about. And that could take a year, it could take 2 years, it could take 4. But you can't get too high or too low during this process because truthfully speaking, it's not on your time, it's not on our time. It's going to happen when it's going to happen. You just got to make sure that you're prepared, you're ready for it, and you're never afraid to pivot.
Yeah. Just keep working, keep thinking of new ideas. I never thought we'd be on a podcast together. And in fact, when we started this thing, we didn't know if anybody would even listen. And we know that they are now. And that was just an idea that we had. And all this takes time and effort. And that's one thing that we've been really consistent with is, even if we don't know what to do next, we're going to keep digging. And even if we think this solution is a risk, we're going to try it and we're going to learn from it and keep moving forward. So that's one thing I've learned. And just keeping a positive outlook also can be really, really helpful. You get from the world what you put out. And I think, putting that positive outlook out, being positive about your product, being positive with your team and dev team and your partners in the process goes a long way too. So, Chris, I have some questions that I didn't tell you I had for you today. So I'm just going to spring these on you because you've done this to me before.
Let's do it.
And don't say you didn't have one, but what's one moment you thought this wasn't going to work?
One moment I thought this wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So, not to name any names, but there was a large player in the space where we met at IMEX. We went to their booth, and thankfully, I was able to give a 1-minute elevator pitch of what WIFT was.
Yeah.
And this player was blown away. And the first thing that they said was, I'm going to put you in touch with someone that's in charge of innovation and partnerships. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, this is it.
Check.
We're about to shoot up the charts.
Yeah.
So we get home from Amex, or excuse me, we get home from IMEX, and we send out the follow-up emails, we get the call scheduled, and we have a formal demo with this partner. And feedback's great, everything's moving the way that we expect, and then we just have a huge drop off where there's no real explanation. We don't understand why communication is lacking, so on and so forth. And eventually that player came back to us and they said, this is just not something of interest or something that we think is investable right now. Wish you the best of luck, but we're no longer interested.
Yep.
And at that moment, I thought, if there was any one player that would be interested in this idea, it would be this player.
Yeah.
And they just show a lack of interest. So I would say that is the number one opportunity that comes to mind, where I was just thinking maybe the idea isn't what we thought it was.
Yep.
And I didn't let that get me down, but it did make me seriously consider, do we need to change the overall idea as a whole?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that as well. I think I was actually in Cancun during that pitch when you did it to that team, and there with my
Yeah.
family on vacation, and we were on a high at that point too. It was a really great call, and then the communication got less and less, and we thought we were well positioned because I think it was like October of 24, and hey, we're getting to the end of
Yep.
the fiscal year. Now's a good time to invest. You got some extra money laying around, and it just didn't play out the way that we thought, and we just lost a little momentum. That was definitely, that one hurt. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
And and for the listeners out there, I think this was the first time where we had amazing feedback, but there was just no follow-up action.
Yeah.
It was, we love what you're doing. This is so cool. I could see the benefit, but we're not interested.
Yep.
And I had never prepared myself for that type of response
Yeah.
because it seems contradictory, but that's the response that we got. And we had to take that
Yeah.
and figure out how to move forward, which was, it was tough for
Yeah.
sure.
And you kind of have to read people too, and you sort of doubt in that moment. You're like, was that feedback real, or were they just being nice? And so
Yeah.
some of the feedback you get and the data you get, maybe you just throw aside because you don't know what's true and what isn't in some of those spaces. So I think, yeah, that was a humbling moment for sure. And, luckily we had a few other things going at the time, but that felt like a little bit of a dead end for sure.
Yeah. And we put a lot of time to get to that point
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah, we're
to be met with that.
year and a half in at that point. So another question sort of related to that, knowing what we know today and the path we've been on and the 2 years it's taken, if you had to
Yeah.
start over tomorrow, what's one thing you'd do different from day one?
Ooh, that's a good one. And I know exactly where I want to go with this. So I've told you this multiple times, but not to disclose actual numbers, but we did make a cash investment to get this thing off the ground,
Yeah.
right? It took a certain amount of money for us to get to MVP, for us to get developers on board, and for us to build this product that we had an idea of. Now, what I would do differently, one, after taking this Harvard course, and two, seeing our journey, I would have advised to not spend so much money on building an MVP, because what you had created already, JR, with your calculator
Yeah.
was essentially an MVP.
Yeah.
It just didn't look as nice as you would have hoped it to be.
Yep.
So I think personally, we could have saved some of that cash up front and used your version of an MVP to get the market validation that we needed early on.
Yeah.
Now, I think there are benefits to the way that we did it.
Yeah.
However, others in our position may not have the amount of capital that it takes to bootstrap a startup.
Yep.
But I think looking back at it, I would try to save a little bit more of our cash very in the beginning because, for example, I'll never forget in the initial stages of us building MVP, we wanted our floor plans to have some type of 3D rendering
Yep.
because we thought that that was just going to be the thing that blew everyone away and that would bring all of the customers to us. And building something with that functionality, we learned was very expensive. And at the time, we felt that no matter whatever price you put on that functionality, that's something that we need.
Yep.
And it's easy to fall into those traps early on when you don't know and you're building based on what you think the market wants.
Yep.
So I would say trying to save your cash up front as much as possible would be something that I would change if we were to do this thing again.
I think that's great. I would agree. Yeah, on the 3D thing, that was us or me actually driving that decision based on what I like and not necessarily
Hmm.
what the consumer wants. And man, yeah, if you go back and we took the app that we had in the moment and instead we go to IMEX 23 and get the feedback and data, now we're in this position in what, May of 24, and maybe we're close to the next level now, and we just bought a bunch of time. So yeah, but we didn't do that. So here we are.
For sure, for sure. So I got a question for you on the flip side.
Yeah.
What gave you the faith to one, start a business with someone that you really had no prior relationship with other than working with me on a few mutual events?
Yeah.
What gave you the confidence to one, pitch the idea to someone like myself, but two, form a business and go on this journey with someone that you really didn't know
Yeah.
that well until you got in the journey?
Yeah. Some of it's gut. I like to think I'm pretty good at understanding people pretty quickly as well. And we did have some experience on the ground, Chris, in the work that we were doing prior to starting up WIFT. And one thing that I look for specifically in people in a professional setting is their ability to put whatever work is needed to be done to get the thing done right. And I think one thing we saw, or I saw with you when we worked together was, I'm not sitting here waiting on the clock to go to happy hour after the end of the day of the event. Like, whatever you need, JR, I'll be backstage and make sure it happens. And you can see that mindset pretty early, and it's a mindset I look for here at 180 quite often. Is it's an ability to put um, any sort of personal ambition you had in that moment aside because the work isn't done. And so that's what sparked my ask from you. And then in the conversations with you that we had, your ability to, I mean, I think you volunteered before I asked to say, yeah, I'll work on this at nights. I'll work on this on weekends. Yeah, JR, just transparently, I have to have a full-time job while we're doing this and I'm running these X, Y, and Z. But I believed you in that moment. And so I knew based on the little bit of work we had done together what your work ethic was. And
Mhm.
that's exactly what we needed. And some of it was just blind faith. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I could only imagine because I'm sure, like, for other people in this position, when it comes to doing or creating a business or a startup, it's hard to trust other people, especially when it comes to money
Yes.
and making strategic decisions. So I've always appreciated how open you've been throughout our relationship and encouraging and empowering.
Yeah.
And I know that that's not common in this space of entrepreneurship, but I was just curious on kind of for the listeners how you came to that decision and what gave you the confidence to take that leap because I don't want to speak too soon, but it seems like it's been paying off. It seems like we have a great working relationship,
Yep.
and I think we share the same work ethic and common goals.
Yeah.
So, for those listening, I would say if you have a gut feeling about someone and the only thing that's stopping you is taking a chance, take the chance. Learn from it.
Yeah. A big thing to look for in people is, can you trust them? and are they honest? And like one thing I do almost to a fault sometimes is I'll always be honest even when the truth is hard. And I felt the same from you, Chris. I felt when I had an idea or we went down an avenue that you didn't like, you pushed back, and that's exactly what we need, right? Like don't just say, JR said this, we're going to do it. No, here's why I think it's a bad idea, or here's what the market's actually saying. And I could get a read from you pretty quickly that you're going to be honest with me in that space. And so I think if folks have the right work ethic and they're honest and not manipulative, then we're in a good space. And I think one of the toughest parts is hard truths in entrepreneurship, and I think we've been pretty good at those for the most part.
For sure. For sure. It's been a fun journey. And
Yeah.
it's crazy to think that on this date, we're 2 years in. I feel like we're still just getting started,
Yeah.
but it's been fun. It's been a learning experience. I've had multiple jobs
Yeah.
since we've started this, juggling work-life balance, all of that stuff. It's been very rewarding, and I wouldn't change a thing. I'm super glad you reached out to me
Yeah.
2 years ago today, and you felt comfortable enough to share your idea with me, and super excited and humbled to be a part of this journey with you.
Yeah.
It's been amazing.
Likewise. And we're just getting started. Like you said, I mean, we're 2 years in, but it feels like still the beginning. But now we're having big conversations about like, hey, here's what happens next when we get to revenue. Here's what the stock structure looks like. Here's like, let's start looking at office space. And that's fun stuff, right? Like,
For sure.
let's go, let's do this thing. So that, yeah, we're not done. We're just getting started. The product's getting better day by day. The story's better. The mission's the same, and we're listening to the marketplace. And I think if we're resilient and we stay after it and continue to be honest with each other and bring the right people in is a big one too.
Yeah.
There's nothing that will stop us.
For sure. So I'll leave it at with this one last question, and we can sign off. Where do you see WIFT in the next 2 years?
Uh, at the end of that 2 years,
At the end of that 2 years, so 2 years from today,
yeah,
May 9th, 2027,
I
where do you
see
think WIFT will be?
I see you running a team of 20 out of that Virginia area, whether they're in office or remote. I see us having hard real estate. I see us having 3 to 4 major enterprise partners and building a groundswell of individual planners as well because of some of the features that we're building. I see momentum in the marketplace, and I see getting the attention of other big players in the space because we're building a tool that planners actually want and not telling them what they want. So I'm excited for that.
Mic drop. I love it. I love it. And I fully believe we will get there because we're already having these conversations now.
Yep.
It's just a matter of time. So, man, episode 13. This
It's
was
my
a
it's
fun
my
one.
lucky number too. So it's your birthday. It's 2 years today, and 13 is my lucky number. It's kind of kismet today.
Let's go. Let's go. Well, for those listening, we'd love to hear your feedback, any questions that you have on our journey, trials and tribulations that we faced, the sideways rain that we faced. We're happy to dive into anything that can help our listeners and our entrepreneurs out there. So please like, comment, subscribe, and until next time.
See ya.